Let's talk about the importance and benefits of oyster shell. We've talked a little bit about how oysters grow up and they form these reefs where the baby oysters or the spat settle on other oysters and they grow up and they form these reefs which provide shelter to other fish. But the shell also provides another important feature, which is the helping with the chemistry of the water.
Andrew Jay is the director of Massachusetts Oyster Project, a volunteer-run organization founded in 2009, dedicated to shell restoration in and around the Boston area.
So by putting in oyster shell, what we're doing is we're putting in a natural buffer that helps offset that acidity. Now, it's not going to do it on a global level, but on a local level, it can be instrumental in changing the. It can be instrumental on a local level in raising the pH and reducing the acidity, and that's helpful to the creatures that are in the ocean.
I caught up with him one Saturday to learn more about the project and its goals.
This is a public access way to the water here. And what the locals noticed was that there were signs of a natural set of some oysters coming back. So what we did is we took some of the shell we had been recycling. Our program was a little bit smaller. Had a pickup truck and some Girl Scout troop from Quincy came over and helped us spread them. It was kind of a fun day. And so if you walk with me, so what we did is the Girl Scouts came down, they spread the shell here with the idea that with the shell down as a substrate that we would catch free-floating spat from which are baby oysters that might be free-floating in the water. We didn't have a great success, but it was a lot of fun, the experiment of the day, and kids learned a lot. Everybody loves being out in the water, on the edge of the water in the tide pools.
Andrew says he's not sure why the oysters didn't bed here, but a number of factors could have contributed to it.
If the shell is down for a while, it'll build up like a bacterial slime or an algae slime on it. And so it may be that the shell, we didn't get it down at the right time, either too early or too late. I don't know. Shifting topics a little bit to the benefits of putting the shell down. Our shell now goes to Wellfleet, Wareham. Those two towns have active oyster restoration programs. Wellfleet has the natural set, so putting down the shell has been a big boon to them in that it's allowed them to increase their oyster population in certain areas such as the oyster propagation zone at the mouth of Duck Creek.
Our next stop was the Langham Hotel to pick up oyster shells. One of the key components of the project is that they recycle shells from local restaurants to be used in the rebedding process.
So we provide to the hotel ordinary 5-gallon buckets. These happen to be ones we obtained from our local hardware store. We do use a lot of recycled buckets. Save That Stuff does a lot of work for food processors and pharmaceutical companies, so we can get a number of recycled buckets from them. And what we do is we just provide these to the facility. They fill them up with shells, and we take back the loaded buckets and take them to our transfer facility and Save That Stuff. Hola, ¿cómo está?
Bien, man.
Empty buckets go there. Full buckets here.
Past the kitchen is Cafe Filiori, the restaurant in the Langham that serves the most oysters. Mark Sapienza has been head chef there for 17 years.
The Oyster Project, I became aware of through one of our fish purveyors. And we contacted them, they came in, we had some discussions with them, and found out that it was certainly something that married well with what our goals were here at the hotel. We were presented last year with a certificate of merit from Mass Oyster Project for our efforts in actually being one of the upstarts with the oyster collecting in in the hotels and the larger restaurant scenarios, and kind of showed that the other restaurant that it was a doable green initiative that really didn't take a lot of effort, but it kind of pays itself back forward, in multiples. Most of our oysters we sell are in our weekly Sunday brunch. And, if I did some math, I could tell you I probably order about 600 oysters a week on a regular brunch. I mean, we just had Easter and Mother's Day's coming. I mean, I ordered 1,200 oysters for those holidays. So, we don't do brunch for a couple months during the summer. So say 40, I'd say a good 40 weeks maybe at about 600, 800 oysters a weekend.
Over here.
Nice. How heavy do you think that is?
This is probably 30 pounds or so.
Once back on the road, we headed to Save That Stuff, a waste collection and recycling company that offers storage space for the shells. On the way, I learned more about the project's beginnings.
The idea was bandied about by a group of people in Charlestown saying, gee, if these oysters have so much potential, and we wondered if they had ever been in Boston Harbor, and if they had been in Boston Harbor, could we bring them back?
In fact, oysters were once in Boston Harbor. They were so plentiful at one time that roads were paved with them. But by the early 20th century, overfishing and industrialization led to their depletion. Recently, Mass Oyster Project has been working with State Representative Dan Ryan of Charlestown on drafting legislation pushing for better regulation and more restoration opportunities.
Dan took it on as a favor to one of his constituents, but what he saw was that there was tremendous interest from co-sponsors, other representatives and senators in the state, to be supportive of this initiative, and it grew pretty significantly. Since that point in time, there's been a meeting. We brought everyone together to discuss this legislation, and where we are now is the Division of Marine Fisheries is chartered to take our draft legislation and meld it a little bit into something that they're more amenable with. Unfortunately, the Division of Marine Fisheries is not always the most responsive, or it appears that they're moving a little bit slowly in carrying up their part of the process.
I contacted the Division of Marine Fisheries and spoke with Jeff Kennedy, the regional shellfish supervisor, to hear what he had to say.
It was a very positive meeting, and I think it wasn't as limiting as the original legislation was. The group felt that there was a need to expand the the goals of the legislation to not just limit it to oysters, but to include all shellfish. So it was a very interesting and very, I thought, productive meeting. So it will be moving forward, no doubt about it.
And what do you think of what they're trying to do in their project?
Certainly, shellfish restorations, shellfish enhancement is a goal of the division. So I think it's a very good proposal, and I thought that the inclusion by these other user groups, and the fact that it was broadened to not just be a narrow focus on oysters, but rather for all shellfish, I thought that was just made the legislation stronger.
So when did the partnership with Save That Stuff start?
We've been active in partnership with them for about 4 years now, 4 or 5 years. Oh, these are the frozen ones. Because these have been kept in cold storage, these 2 buckets, they come out as a block.
So those 2 buckets, What do the oysters, that many oysters, like what is their capability as far as like if you were to put that many back in the water, what could they do for an environment?
Well, each oyster can filter about 40 gallons of water a day. So 200 oysters could filter 8,000 gallons of water a day. Now, significantly, if you take an oyster like this one, in Wellfleet Harbor, you might get, as part of the set, on that one shell, you can get 10, sometimes 20 spat on a single shell. Now, of that, 5 of those might reach it to maturity, because what happens is they crowd each other out, the stronger ones prevail. But basically, those 5 spat that might previously have been stuck on mud where they would have died, with this one shell, you could be supporting oysters that would be filtering 200 gallons of water a day.
Save That Stuff is the last stop for the shells for now. They will dry out for 6 months to a year, at which time a project volunteer will take the shells to be rebedded. Looking forward, Andrew says Mass Oyster is looking for ways to expand their organization.
How do we shepherd the resources? How do we gather people together and build that critical mass that we need to make that happen? The good news is we've learned a lot as an organization. We've grown, and we're sizable and well respected. But taking it to the next level is going to be is something we have not yet figured out exactly how we're going to do.